Good morning. Welcome to this week's Grow, where we gather to recharge, organize, and work here as members of MWEG. We are so glad that you are all joining us today. And for those watching the recording, we hope that you find this information useful. We are going to be talking about MWEG's advocacy for 2025 and what that looks like and what some of our members can expect and be kind of watching for. We have Emma Petty-Adams, who is our co-executive director here at MWEG, and we have Christy Carter-Bake, who is our director of advocacy. Or what is your new title? I know that it has changed.
It has just recently changed. I am the deputy director of advocacy.
Deputy director of advocacy. I was close. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Emma and Christy, and they're going to explain what we're going to be doing, what this year might look like. Although as things change and as administration works through things, obviously advocacy kind of works with that as well, but they'll talk about our core areas that we're going to focus on. So I'll go ahead and turn the time over to them.
Thanks, Rachel. It's good to see everyone. Thanks for those who are showing up live, and always appreciate the many of you who watch after the fact. It's always great to know that you're doing that. So we're going to have a fairly kind of a good casual back and forth conversation between Christy and I today to talk to you a little bit about changes to our advocacy program and just things we're doing that are the same, different, and trying new things in 2025. Christy and I are longtime MWEG advocacy veterans, so to speak. Christy's been very much involved with MWEG advocacy for pretty much the duration of my time as executive director the past 5.5 years, working on our environmental advocacy work. Really has set up a really responsive and organized program there in the states we've been working in. And we're thrilled that this year she was willing to increase her hours and role and become our deputy director of advocacy. And in this role this year, she's really overseeing our state-based work. And just to lay to kind of set the table a little bit, some of you may have done, responded to MWEG calls to actions that are on for federal work. Some of you may have done some state work. Those are obviously two different sets of legislators. It varies greatly from state to state. Every government is different. They have different schedules for their legislature. They have different rules and laws and personalities and political makeup. And so what we're trying to do at MWEG is make sure that we're balancing the resources that we have. And those resources include you, our members. They include our volunteers, our contractors, and our employees. And we could all work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and not respond to all the needs and desires of both our membership and our staff. So we're really been trying to take a measured and thoughtful approach to resources, where we put them. And the other thing that we're trying to make sure we do is that we're always kind of trying and piloting new programs and things, and then seeing if we can then replicate that in other places. So with state-based work in particular, which I'm going to have Christy tell you more about, Utah is obviously a place where we have the most members and we have the longest history of engaging. We had some very active and committed volunteers there who've created a network of an advocacy committee and women who've been able to really engage in legislative session there. And so we've taken a lot of the lessons learned from that state and tested them out in other states. And this year we're really, I think, doing that even more extensively in the state of Idaho and Arizona. And we're taking a really customized approach to each state. It's not a one size fits all. It's like, if this works here, let's try something similar here, but let's adjust it for that state. And with the goal to, over time, as our membership builds and we build community in states across the United States, then we'd love to grow and do state advocacy work in other places as well. But this year it's going to be focused in on Utah, Idaho, Arizona, and Nevada. And then focus on community building, as well as empowering you, our members, to work within state legislatures all over the U.S. as you choose on your own with the skills that we hopefully can provide. So Christy, you want to tell them, turn over to you, and we can kind of go back and forth a little bit, but you've been around for a while. You've kind of watched this evolution, and we're really willing this year. We're so excited to help to really oversee our state-based work. Talk a little bit about that and why. I mean, maybe the first question is like, what about state-based legislative and advocacy work appealed to you? Like, why is it something that you feel committed to and wanted to work on behalf of MWEG?
Yeah, so I actually have a really long history of working for state legislatures. In college, I interned for the Utah State Legislature. That was, I won't date myself by saying how many years ago, more than half my life ago. But I have always been a close follower of state politics and state legislatures wherever I've lived, which has been in several states. So I've always been really interested in state work. And I think a lot of things, could get done at the state level that can't get done on the federal level for a variety of reasons, constitutional reasons for one, and for another, just the idea of kind of states as labs, and they can test out different programs and different ideas, and see how different things play out in different places. And I like the customization of a kind of more local approach to a lot of the big problems that we face as communities and society more generally. So I think a lot of really, really important work is done in the states, and that's where we can really learn to connect with our elected officials who represent us as constituents and have a lot more direct say in how things play out politically. So obviously, we have a lot of members in the Mountain West states. So starting in Utah and then kind of branching out to Idaho and Arizona is a pretty logical progression of our institutional lobbying work. And just, to kind of drive a point home, Emma, that you had touched on is that MWEG has our advocacy areas and our advocacy priorities, and we're going to engage in those as a group and as an institution, but there are lots of really interesting policy solutions and ideas out there in a variety of different advocacy areas that we want to empower and encourage our members to be able to engage in as they see fit in their own personal lives. And so a big part of what we're doing in the next year or so is also to be developing programs and educational material that can help our members engage individually, not just within the framework of MWEG. So there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on, a lot of really big problems that we're solving and legislatures are facing and thinking about from a policy perspective. So there's a lot of really exciting and interesting work to engage in at the state level. And generally, state legislative sessions begin the first of the year. So we have a couple states we're working in where the session's already started. It started this week in Arizona, and it started last week in Idaho. It starts next week in Nevada, and then we also have Nevada starting the 1st of February, and they tend to run for a few weeks or months depending on the state early in the year. Some states are actually on an every other year schedule. So if you are in Nevada or Texas and you have issues that you care about, this is a great time to jump in and get involved in some individual advocacy, because those states are only in session every other year, and this is one of the years they are in session. So that's kind of what we have, going on, Emma.
Well, let's talk maybe about, I think we'd like to dive into some details a little bit about how we're setting up our official advocacy work in these states. But before we do that, because I'm mindful of the fact that actually the majority of our members live outside of Utah. So I know we have, we have a concentration there, but most of you don't live there. So let's talk through a little bit about how MWEG's resources and MWEG as an institution can be useful, and things that you can do as an individual to prepare and participate in legislative sessions, even when MWEG is not officially taking positions in your state. So one example would be something that we've done in Utah and are going to try to start to do in other states as there's interest and time and leadership, is what we call Legislative 101. Before you even begin to engage in the legislative session, it's worth spending some time understanding how your legislature works, understanding how to track bills, following good news sources. Like in different states will have different political reporters. Some are better than others. It's good to follow a couple different ones. Those political reporters can be very helpful in helping you kind of sort through, what's coming up. But oftentimes they're reporting on. Sometimes they'll report on bills that aren't as much in the public eye. But it actually most states have some sort of a tracking system where you can log in, you can set up an account. I don't think it's most. I think a lot of them do though, Christy, as far as you know. There are ways to track bills. You can search for terms and say, I care about education, or I care about this or that, clean air. You can search for terms in bills and you can track them. And that's just, I would really highly recommend those of you who haven't done any state advocacy work and want to just start to kind of feel your way through it, would be to do that. Figure out your state system. There are likely organizations like League of Women Voters and others who have resources for that. And it doesn't mean that MWEG won't develop resources in other states, but there's a lot of good places to start. The other thing to do is maybe grab a friend or two to help you, like maybe divide things up. You're like, I care about this, I care about this, I'm going to follow this, you're going to follow this, let's keep each other informed. And then, of course, probably the most important thing is just to reach out to your state legislators and introduce yourself. The best time to do that is before the session or before it gets too busy, but it's never too late. It's very different than reaching out to your federal members of Congress, who you'll never talk to personally, most likely. But your state legislators, depending upon where you are and who they are, they should have few enough constituents that, and honestly, majority of the constituents aren't reaching out to them. So you can be one of the ones who develops a relationship. And we would advise developing that relationship, if possible, almost like independent of an issue at first. Or you could kind of introduce yourself, talk about what you're interested in. You can certainly talk about issues, but it's better to develop that relationship when you're not like necessarily telling them they're wrong about something, or if you can thank them for their service. Christy, what would you add to that? Help kind of women who maybe aren't living in states where MWEG is doing official advocacy this year.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on a concept that we would think of or call political capital, which is that you want to build these relationships. They're sort of reciprocal, right? So you can, start to know your elected officials as people and let them know what you're interested in, and that you're following them. And that includes good things they do as well as bad things they do. And if you only show up to attack them, it's a pretty one-sided and not very effective peacemaking relationship, right? So anytime you can interact with your state officials, and as Emma said, they are responsive to their constituents. You will probably be able to talk to them, and not just a member of their staff, unlike at the federal level. So there really is an opportunity there to build connections, and you live in the same communities, and you can find common interests and common. Even if you disagree with some of the things they do, certainly there are going to be things they do that are really helpful and really great for your communities. And so making sure that they know that you're appreciative of the things that they have done, or even just the time that they spend to connect with you or connect with others, that can really go a long way towards building a relationship of trust, where if you do have things that you're concerned about, you can address those with your elected officials in a way that is constructive, rather than them feeling attacked all the time and viewing you as a person who only shows up to attack them. So that's absolutely available to everyone everywhere in the US, whether MWEG is actively working in that state or not. If you can get a community of people in your area, Central is a great place where you can connect with other MWEG members in your areas and your states, and then you could start to reach out to your elected officials and start really building relationships with them.
So I just want to pause for a moment here and just know that I'm talking to a group of women who culturally oftentimes feel inclined that they have to do everything and need to do it all well and do it today and do it correctly. And we want to just be really clear that one of the goals of MWEG is to kind of offer a suite of options and ideas, and that we trust that you will customize it according to your needs and the spirit to what is needful and good in your life right now. So if it feels overwhelming to you to start tracking bills, then don't do that this year. Start with like maybe reaching out. If reaching out to a legislator feels scary, and that's totally fair, then start tracking bills. Like, don't feel like in order to be an advocate, we really, really try hard not to put forth the persona of the ideal advocate and try to hold her up as like it's as the one that we should all be like. And more try to give you options and opportunities and encouragement and support and community so that you can customize your advocacy efforts according to your time in life, to your interests. And so one way to, there's multiple things on the road to becoming an effective advocate, and one of them is your news sources, finding good news sources and following an issue for the session. If that's what you do the first year and then next year you add something else on, that's great. So I feel like this is something that I always need to make sure I'm expressing to our MWEG members is, I mean, Christy and I are working. This is a full-time job for me. This is at the moment full-time job for Christy, theoretically a part-time job. Like, we're not coming forward and being like, be like us. This is our lives right now. This is what we do. We're trying to enable you to figure out ways to engage that work for you. And frankly, I mean, this is something to pray about. Something to be like, hey, what's the best? Can you help guide me? What's the best way I should engage? I want to be a peacemaker in the public sphere. I want to help create peace in my communities, my state, my nation. Here's some ideas, help direct me, and then just try something. And it's always better with a friend in a community. So if you can find someone to do it with you, that's great. So sometimes in the past, I think we've had women who feel like if they don't do everything, they're not an MWEG superstar. And we actually don't. We want to disabuse us all of that notion that we all need to be MWEG superstars, because none of us are. I regularly go to sleep and just leave stuff undone. I'm definitely not one of those women who I had a seminary teacher who used to like stay up till midnight, like making cookies for us and then show up at 5. And it was like held up as like this paragon of virtue. And I was like, my mom was not like that. Mom got her sleep and she turned stuff down and she stood up to people and she didn't always say yes. So I have that background, but you need to be you. You need to do it authentically according to you. And there's no model of MWEG advocacy perfection here.
Yeah, I mean, like to go along with that for sure. I've worked in advocacy for a lot of years, and I have seen some things people burn out because it's easy to do. It's easy to burn out. There's so much going on, and there's so many, good things you can get involved in, or scary things you feel like you need to oppose, and the world is never going to limit itself to accommodate your bandwidth, right? You have to make choices that preserve your ability to, exist and do this work as a going concern. So, and this isn't just an MWEG thing, right? It's a more broadly in advocacy and in communities that engage in advocacy. They are really prone to burnout. And so I think it's really important that you say, you set some parameters, or like if you decide to track bills, don't track every bill on a particular issue. You will very quickly be buried in notifications and things that you're going to have to like dig out from. So you need to be selective, and you need to really think about where you're going to spend your time and your energy and your resources, and also know that advocacy is a long game. Just generally, like if you show up for something this session that's really important to you, it may or may not go your way, and that just means there's more work to be done, and you have to preserve, whatever capacity you have to continue to engage with this. It's not a matter of days, even if the session is short. It's a matter of weeks or years, which can be a little bit dispiriting sometimes, I know, but just know that these are how our systems work, and it's not something you're necessarily doing wrong. It's just sometimes it takes a lot of years and a lot of conversations and a lot of bringing issues to the table, and you just have to preserve yourself and your mental and physical well-being to be able to to continue to engage in more than one session. Nothing about this is quick. The system isn't designed to be quick and turn over quickly. It's people, getting information and synthesizing information and making policy, and policy is never perfect. And so then you have to come back and, tweak it or make adjustments, and just that's how literally the system works. It is a feature, not a bug. And so you have to go in knowing that that's how it is, and protecting yourself in whatever way you need to be able to, stay engaged, step back if you need to, come back when you're ready. This is all going to be you being reflective about it and seeing what works within the scope of your life and your other commitments. So I am saying absolutely get involved and engaged in some way, but also do it in a way that is thoughtful and not just kind of frenetic. It's really easy to go in there and just be like, oh my gosh, there are so many problems. There are so many things that I should be working on. No such thing as should be here. You've got to, look at your own values and your own bandwidth, and then be selective about the ways that you engage.
So on that note, so it's our job, Christy and I and others as the MWEG advocacy team, to do that exact same thing for the institution of MWEG. We could be spending all our time every day just chasing issues, and there's so many things that need to be worked on, a lot of injustice, a lot of problems in the world. But we also try to kind of apply this same philosophy to our institutional work and the decisions that we make to work on. That's why we've limited ourselves to 4 advocacy areas. And then within those 4 advocacy areas, we're only working on certain policies at a time. And so I think we're trying to model what it looks like to make wise and thoughtful decisions that can help us build the skills. Like our advocacy areas and our policies and the things we work on are chosen very carefully to try to help women build different skills. So it's all very member focused. But we do have to limit. And so there might be a time this year where something will come up that you wish MWEG was working on officially. And we say to you, that doesn't mean you shouldn't work on it yourself. You should go for it. We encourage you to go for it and to build those skills. I do want to quickly address, and then maybe Christy could talk a little bit about, I think one way the processes and the systems and the pilots that MWEG are setting up within these states are actually set up to try to help solve this exact problem that Christy and I were just talking about, which is burnout, frustration, feeling like it's too much, overwhelm. And so we're kind of setting up some ways for a group of women to come together in a state and work on behalf of MWEG on the issues in a way that kind of spreads the love around a bit. I did just want to briefly touch on, I know the nominations hearings are happening this week for a lot of Trump's cabinet nominations. We've done a couple CTAs on that. I think we're up to, women have, I think, given over 800 letters. And I believe that's what we're up to. And I cannot tell you how important those letters are. They are unique. That's the other thing that's really interesting about it. As there's not a form letter. We gave you a form to kind of fill out, and then you went in and you wrote personal details about your lives. You gave a personal plea. You were very persuasive. And I've been interacting with a couple of senators' offices and sharing your letters very specifically, making sure they know that those are unique. They're not a form letter. Talking to other advocates and lobbyists on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, and just hearing so much encouragement. I had a conversation with a contact that I've made who is kind of former national intelligence, and he's just been very concerned about some of the nominations, but is not in a position right now where he can be speaking up publicly. And there was another person as well who said the same thing to me. And when I told them about the number of letters and the substance and content of those letters that you have sent, I mean, just the relief that they felt like someone was working on it, and it was just a big deal to them. That doesn't mean that some of these nominations aren't going to get through, that are, shall we say, problematic, inexperienced, and potentially even destructive. And I just want to prepare you for that and say that doesn't mean that it wasn't still an important effort to make, because a lot of what we're doing is we are we're a voice that's slowly kind of persuading and providing cover for senators in particular to stand up and push back. And they need to hear from constituents to balance out the other constituents sometimes, frankly, that are coming their direction. They need that balance, and you are exactly the voices that are needed. I do think there will, if I were to guess, I think there will be some nominations that won't go through, and I think there'll be some that will be difficult. And so I just want to alert you to that, and like Christy said, this is a long game that we're playing, and the skills and the relationships that you're developing and the voice you're establishing is extremely important. Yeah, so I just think I don't know that Curtis said he'll fully support him yet. We'll find out about that one, Brittany. But I just this is why you need to pace yourself. Like, and I think you also need to look at those letters that you're writing to senators and representatives. In this case, talking specifically about senators, as like a way to learn and develop your voice too. And if you have an interest. You got that? Okay, I didn't see that, Brittany. Good to know. You're ahead of me on that one. So I think that turning those into letters to the editor is also really important. We do know that staffers search for their bosses' names in the news every day, and if you can mention their name in a letter, that kind of amplifies your work. Okay, so let's spend a couple more minutes, Christy, to finish up talking about kind of some of the state, how we're doing state-based work in a way that kind of spreads the load amongst a group of women, and maybe emphasizing how intentional we are about making sure that those geographically and ideologically diverse group, and that's where our power comes from as MWEG.
Yeah, so we've kind of modeled everything off of the way that Utah's been run for several years, because our team there in Utah has done a really fantastic job laying the groundwork, and they've had just really excellent leadership and a very committed committee there for a few years now. So we're trying to replicate that in Arizona and Idaho, where we have brought on state advocacy directors or coordinators. I believe coordinators is the word we're using to call them with all of the organizational shifts. Sometimes I'm still falling back on our old titles, but coordinators who will be registered lobbyists, and they will be staffing committees, and those committees are going to be drawn from geographic areas all over the state. So for example, in Idaho, we have people in the Twin Falls area, we have people in the Boise area, we have people in the Idaho Falls area, we have people up in Coeur d'Alene. So we have this really broad range of geographic representation there in Idaho, which is important, with a bunch of different population centers and a bunch of different issues. And that way we get stakeholders from a lot of different communities with a lot of different viewpoints who are on this committee and can kind of help everyone understand why certain issues are particularly interesting or particularly pertinent to different areas. And we have a wide range of political affiliations. So we have people who are more left-leaning, we have people who are more right-leaning, we have people who are more centrist, and we also have people who are interested in different issues, especially within our advocacy areas, who can kind of bring their perspectives to the table. And this will help the advocacy coordinators in each state kind of gauge what bills to weigh in on, and people can develop their expertise in certain advocacy areas and get a better understanding of how these policies might play out or what the goals are. And so they're going to be provided with periodic training and education as to how to best engage with the legislature, but they're also going to be bringing their individual areas of expertise and community knowledge, so that the state issues as a whole are better understood by the coordinators, and they can best gauge how to and where to spend our political capital as an institution, and where we can really move the needle, and where we just, sometimes you just need to go on record. Emma was talking about how sometimes the letters were not going to change the course of what they've decided to do, but sometimes just going on record is really important. So there's a wide range of ways to engage. There are letters, there are meetings, there are op-eds, there are sharing content on social media. So we try and really think about how to prioritize the ways we engage, and if there's something that's high impact but pretty easy to do, then obviously that's something you should prioritize doing. If it is costly in terms of time or resources or volunteers, then we're going to be a lot more careful about how we engage and what we're going to do. So it's all kind of a calculation. It's going to be very specific to the state. The political dynamics in Idaho are very, very different from the political dynamics in Arizona in a lot of ways, and so having these really state-specific teams is going to help us understand how best to engage and what our members more broadly need in each of those states.
Okay, we're past 30 minutes, so we're going to close out here. Happy to, if there's any last questions, happy to answer them. I just want to point out something I wrote to Brittany in the chat, because I know hearing about Curtis saying he'll support HEGSETH is a blow and disappointing. We've had different points during MWEG's history where we felt a little bit like, we knew something was really important and we were kind of watching it unfold before our eyes and we couldn't do anything to stop it. And one of the phrases that is always coming to my mind in those times is witness. I think it's really important to be a part of a group of women and Americans who witness to things and who really say the things that need to be said in hard moments. So I think HEGSETH is a particularly interesting, that's one way to put it, moment, because it was kind of a little bit of a trial balloon for seeing how much kind of a public social media kind of bullying campaign could influence and get senators to stick with the program there. And it clearly it has worked here. It's looking like more and more with HEGSETH. So I just think the reality is, there may be times where we feel like we're the only ones speaking up in the voice in the wilderness, and it's important to keep doing that, and to step out when you need to and take a break and to come back in. I experience disappointment all the time in this work. We work really hard to try to persuade someone to do what you think is the right thing, and then they disappoint you. That is just kind of a regular feature of it. So it's okay to have days where you're discouraged and you're just like, it's not working out how I want it to. And just kind of come here to us and let's all hang out together and kind of talk through it and then turn around and see what we can do the next day to keep it going. This, I think, one feature of anti-democratic actors is to persuade or convince us that nothing we do matters. Like that is kind of that's a fact. That it's a loss of hope is intention, trying to facilitate a loss of hope and a disconnection from each other. And frankly, the other thing that is very much a feature of those who would kind of try to destroy our system of government is to turn us on each other and to have us, that whole enemy thing, right? So when I'm feeling discouraged, I kind of like dig into like my stubborn self, and I'm like, I'm not going to allow them to make me lose hope, and I'm not going to allow them to hate, to push me to hate or to treat others with disrespect or unkindness. And that's kind of the way, that's my personal like pitch to myself. So if maybe you have a different way of doing it, but figure out some way you're going to need it. You're going to need some sort of like personal mantra to push through. And so I would encourage that and what will work for you. But for me, a lot of times, it's this community. I just come to the MWEG community and Christy and I get a front row view to all of the things you're doing across the US that are amazing. And so like, and that our range again from little teeny tiny to large, and then just think of all those things being put together, and we get to see this. And so frankly, it's actually really hard for me to stay discouraged for very long, because I'm watching women just speak up and be empowered and build relationships and change the family group text chat to a more media literate one, and learn how to be a peacemaker. And when you get to see that every day, it's like that work is everything. So keep it up, keep going, and take a break when you need to. Turn it back over to Rachel.
Thank you, Emma and Christy, for laying that out and kind of explaining what the process looks like, and reminding us that advocacy often is a long game. So we appreciate those who joined us today. And just as a reminder that as Emma said, to find the parts of advocacy that speak to you and that maybe work best in this season of your life. So I appreciate that reminder. I do want to tell you that our registration for our conference is open. If you haven't seen that, we have an early bird pricing going on now. There's no code needed for the early bird price. Just you can register through the MWEG website. There are links to registration on MWEG Central. We hope you're all gathered there and taking part of the discussion that happens on MWEG Central. So until then, we will see you guys all next week. Thank you for joining us.